Una pressed her hand against the cold glass window of her small apartment on Sector Prime. Outside, alien ships glided through the purple sky like silver fish in an endless ocean. She had been living on the Galactic Council's capital world for 8 months now, and the sight still made her heart race with excitement. The young woman was only 19 years old, but she had already earned her place at the prestigious Council Research Institute. She studied alien biology, fascinated by the countless life forms that filled the galaxy. Earth had joined the Galactic Council 23 years ago, and Una belonged to the first generation of humans who grew up knowing they were not alone in the universe. Her communicator buzzed. It was a message from her brother Hyun back on Earth. "How's my little scientist doing? Mom says you haven't called in 2 weeks." Una smiled. Hyun always worried about her. He worked for Earth's government in some classified research position he could never talk about. She typed back a quick reply promising to call home soon. But home would have to wait. Una had made a discovery that she couldn't ignore. For the past 3 months, she had been analyzing genetic samples from various species as part of her research. Everything was routine until she noticed something strange. Some of the samples showed signs of artificial modification. At first, she thought it was just standard medical treatment. But as she dug deeper, the pattern became clear and horrifying. 3 of the major council species were conducting illegal genetic experiments. The Vrex Dominion, the Kresh Collective, and the Luminar Assembly had been taking genetic material from younger species without permission. The experiments were cruel and violated every law the Council had established. Worse, some of the samples came from humans, from Earth's fringe colonies where people disappeared and no one asked questions. Una's hands shook as she compiled the evidence. She had documentation, genetic records, and communication logs that proved everything. The Council had strict ethics laws. They would stop this immediately. They had to. She requested a hearing with the Council's Ethics Committee. To her surprise, they responded within hours. They wanted to see her evidence right away. Una felt a surge of hope. The system worked. Justice would be served. Ambassador Minji, Earth's representative to the Council, came to see her the night before the hearing. The older woman's face was tight with concern. "Una, are you absolutely certain about this evidence?" Minji asked. "Yes, Ambassador. I've checked everything 3 times. The Vrex, the Kresh, and the Luminar have been experimenting on humans and other species for years, maybe decades." Minji was quiet for a long moment. "The species you're accusing are 3 of the most powerful members of the Council. If you're right, this will cause a political earthquake. If you're wrong, or if they can discredit you, Earth's position here will be destroyed." "I'm not wrong," Una said firmly. "And isn't that why we joined the Council? To make things better? To stand up for what's right?" Minji smiled sadly. "You still believe in the system. I hope you're right to do so." The next day, Una walked into the grand chamber with her data drive clutched in her hand. The room was enormous, with seats rising in curved tiers around a central platform. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the chamber. Una had never seen so many aliens in one place. Captain Jiho from Earth's diplomatic vessel, the Harmony, stood near the entrance. He gave her an encouraging nod. At least some humans were here to support her. The hearing began. Una presented her evidence on the massive holographic displays. She showed the genetic samples, the modification patterns, and the communication logs. She spoke clearly and calmly, explaining everything in terms anyone could understand. The chamber was silent when she finished. Then Prime Counselor Vrexital, the leader of the Council and a member of the Vrex species, rose from his seat. "This is a very serious accusation," he said, his reptilian voice echoing through the chamber. "You claim that 3 founding members of the Council have violated our most sacred laws." "I'm not claiming anything," Una replied. "The evidence speaks for itself." "Evidence that could have been fabricated," said a Kresh representative, its insectoid mandibles clicking rapidly. "Evidence from a species that has been part of our Council for barely 2 decades. We have reviewed your so-called proof," added a Luminar representative, its energy form pulsing with different colors. "It is clearly the work of a terrorist trying to destabilize the Council." Una felt her stomach drop. "What? No, I'm not a terrorist. I'm a scientist. These records are real." "This hearing is concluded," Rextal announced. "The Council has determined that the human Una has attempted to spread dangerous lies and undermine galactic peace. The penalty for such actions is clear." "Wait!" Ambassador Minji stood up. "You can't just..." "Silence!" Rextal's voice boomed. "The council has spoken." Council enforcers appeared from side doors. They weren't coming to escort her out. They were armed. Yuna's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. She had followed all the rules. She had believed in the system. She looked at Ambassador Minji, at Captain Jiho, at all the alien faces surrounding her. Most looked away. "You're making a mistake," Yuna said, her voice steady despite her terror. "The truth doesn't go away just because you kill me." "The truth," Rextal said coldly, "is whatever the council decides it to be." The enforcers raised their weapons. Yuna activated her neural backup transmitter with a thought, one of the small pieces of Earth technology she wore. Her last message would reach her brother. He would know she was telling the truth. "Tell Hyun," she whispered into the transmitter. "The files are real. The weapons fired. The grand chamber filled with light." Ambassador Minji screamed. Captain Jiho moved toward Yuna, but other enforcers blocked his path. The execution was broadcast across all council worlds, just as Rextal intended. A warning to anyone who would dare challenge the council's authority. Within an hour, Ambassador Minji was expelled from Sector Prime. Captain Jiho and the crew of the Harmony barely escaped as council ships fired on them. The ship's black box recorded everything, including the footage of Yuna's death. The transmission reached Earth 3 days later. For 48 hours, Earth's government said nothing. The news networks showed Yuna's execution on repeat. People gathered in the streets, holding vigils for a young woman who had believed in justice and died for it. Then Earth's response began. Every human ship in Council space received the same order. Return home immediately. Every diplomat, every scientist, every trader, every tourist. They all came back. No explanations given, no protests filed. Just silent, orderly evacuation. The Council sent messages demanding to know what Earth was doing. No response came. Humanity's military fleet disappeared. Ships that had been on patrol, bases that housed thousands of soldiers, all of it simply vanished. Satellite networks around Earth went dark. Communication channels closed. The galaxy watched in confusion as Earth withdrew completely from galactic civilization. Prime Counselor Vrextal declared it a victory. The young upstart species had been put in its place. They had learned to respect the Council's power. He gave a speech celebrating how the Council had maintained order and stability. But on Earth, behind the silence, something else was happening. Hyun received his sister's final message. He listened to her last words 3 times, tears streaming down his face. Then he wiped his eyes, stood up, and walked into a secret facility, buried deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. "Authorization code, Ghost Protocol," he said to the security system. "We're activating everything." Admiral Doyen looked at the authorization order on his screen. 3 words that changed everything. Protocol 0 approved. Dr. Sumi powered up the systems that humanity had been building in secret for 23 years. Systems the Council didn't know existed. Weapons that rewrote the laws of physics. Earth had been preparing. While the Council thought humanity was weak and primitive, humans had been studying, learning, and building. They had reverse-engineered every piece of Council technology. They had found weaknesses in every Council species. They had been patient. Now the patience was over. 6 months passed. The galaxy would soon learn why humanity's silence was more terrifying than any threat could ever be. 6 months had passed since Yuna's execution, and the Galactic Council was growing concerned about Earth's silence. Prime Counselor Vrextal sat in his office overlooking the capital city of Sector Prime. Outside his window, ships from 1,000 worlds came and went in carefully controlled patterns. Everything in Council space followed rules, maintained order. Everything except Earth. "They still refuse to respond to our communications?" he asked his assistant. "Yes, Counselor. All channels to Earth remain closed. The Sol system has become completely isolated." Vrextal's scaled face twisted in what might have been a frown. "Send another delegation. Tell them the Council demands they resume trade agreements. Tell them there will be consequences if they continue this childish silence." The delegation never made it past the edge of Earth's solar system. Automated defense stations appeared from nowhere, their weapons locked on the Council ships. A recorded message played in every known language. "Turn back. This is your only warning." The delegation turned back. Council intelligence agencies scrambled to understand what was happening. They sent spy drones toward Earth. The drones vanished. They tried to intercept human communications. There were no communications to intercept. They searched for Earth's military fleet. The fleet was gone. Not destroyed. Not hiding. Simply gone. Every human military base that had existed in Council space was now empty. Soldiers, ships, weapons, supplies, all of it had disappeared during the evacuation 6 months ago. It was as if humanity had taken its entire military and hidden it somewhere the Council couldn't find. "This is impossible," said the Kresh intelligence director, its compound eyes scanning reports from dozens of worlds. "A species cannot hide an entire military force. There are only so many places in the galaxy where ships can exist." "Perhaps they destroyed their own fleet," suggested a Luminar analyst, its energy form flickering thoughtfully. "A gesture of submission?" "No," said a quiet voice from the back of the intelligence chamber. It belonged to an old Vrex military commander named Torak, one of the few council members who had actually studied human history. "They're planning something." "Planning what?" The Kresh director clicked in annoyance. "They're one species. One system. We are thousands of species across 10,000 worlds. Even if they wanted war, they would lose in days." Torak didn't argue, but he kept thinking about something he had read in the human historical databases. Humans had a saying, "Beware the fury of a patient man." These particular humans had been very patient for 23 years. On Earth, inside the secret facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, Hyun stood before a massive holographic display. It showed every council world, every military installation, every ship, every weapon. 23 years of careful observation had given humanity a complete map of galactic civilization. "We have comprehensive data on all 3 target species," Dr. Sumi reported, walking up beside him. She looked tired. They all did. 6 months of preparation left little time for sleep. The Vrex biological vulnerabilities are confirmed. The Kresh hive mind frequency has been isolated. The Luminar energy patterns have been mapped. And Cassandra, Hyun asked, "The network is ready. We can activate it at any time." Hyun looked at his sister's photo on the screen, Yuna smiling in her university graduation picture. She had been so hopeful about joining the council. She had believed in justice and fairness. She had been wrong, and it had killed her. In the weeks after her death, Hyun had received her hidden files, not just the evidence she had presented to the council, but everything else she had discovered. The council's 3 most powerful species hadn't just been conducting illegal experiments. They had been systematically murdering anyone who discovered their crimes. Yuna was the 1,847th person they had killed. Most of the victims came from younger council species. People who asked too many questions. People who found evidence. People who believed the system would protect them. The council had been at peace for 800 years. But it wasn't peace. It was control through fear and murder. And the 3 species responsible had grown comfortable in their power. "Admiral Doyun is requesting authorization for Protocol 0, Phase 1, Dr. Sumi said quietly. Hyun took a deep breath. Once they started, there would be no going back. Earth would either win completely or be destroyed. There was no middle ground. "Tell him he has authorization," Hyun said. "It's time to show the Council what humans have been building." On the other side of Earth, in a command center that officially didn't exist, Admiral Doyen received the message. He was a tall man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He had been planning this moment for 6 months. In truth, he had been preparing for it much longer. "All fleet commanders, this is Doyun," he said into the communication system. "Protocol 0, Phase 1 is active. Execute your orders." Across the solar system, ships began to move. Not normal ships. These vessels had been built in secret, incorporating technology the Council didn't know humanity possessed. During 23 years in Council space, human scientists had done more than just study alien technology. They had improved it, combined it, made it do things the original creators never imagined. The Council had made a critical mistake. They had assumed humanity was weak because humans were new to the galactic stage. They had forgotten to ask what humans had been doing during those 23 years. Back on Sector Prime, Prime Counselor Vrextel was losing patience. Earth's continued silence was making him look weak. Other Council members were starting to ask questions. Why did Earth get to ignore Council authority? What made them special? "Assemble a battle fleet," Vrextel ordered. 400 ships, We will go to Earth ourselves and restore order. Counselor, Torak spoke up. Perhaps we should reconsider. We know very little about Earth's current military capabilities. Enough. Vrextel's voice echoed through the chamber. I am tired of this cowardice. They are one world. We are thousands. The matter is decided. 400 ships gathered at Sector Prime. It was the largest fleet the Council had assembled in centuries. Ships from dozens of species, all armed with the latest Council weapons. It was a show of overwhelming force. Captain Jiho, who had witnessed Yuna's execution and barely escaped with his life, now stood on the bridge of a ship called Yuna's Fury. It was one of the new human vessels, and it made the old diplomatic ship Harmony look like a child's toy. Sir, the Council fleet is moving toward Sol System, reported his tactical officer. I see them, Jiho said calmly. He had been waiting for this moment. Maintain position. Let them come. The Council fleet reached the edge of Sol System 3 days later. Sensors showed them Earth, quiet and seemingly defenseless. No military ships appeared to challenge them. No warnings were broadcast. This is Prime Counselor Vrextel to Earth, the message came. You will open communications immediately and submit to Council authority. You have 1 hour to comply. Silence. 59 minutes passed. The Council fleet commanders grew nervous. Something felt wrong. Where were Earth's defenses? Where were the ships? Then at exactly 1 hour, something happened. Every single ship in the Council fleet lost power simultaneously. Engines died. Weapon systems shut down. Life support began to fail. 400 ships all dead in space, all at the same moment. Panic filled the communication channels as crews realized they were suffocating. Then, with the same strange precision, every crew member was forcibly transported to escape pods. The pods launched automatically, carrying the terrified aliens away from their ships. The ships themselves began to shimmer. Not explode, not burn. They simply came apart at the molecular level, dissolving into nothing like sand in the wind. 400 warships, the pride of Council military might, ceased to exist. A single transmission reached the escape pods in every Council language. The voice was human, calm, and absolutely cold. You killed a child. We are not a civilization. We are a memorial, and you are the epitaph. The escape pods were picked up by automated recovery ships and delivered safely back to Council space. Not a single crew member was harmed, but every single one of them carried the same message back to their worlds. Earth was not weak. Earth had been hiding something terrifying. Prime Counselor Vrextel sat in his office staring at the reports. 400 ships gone, destroyed with technology that shouldn't exist. His hands were shaking. What are they? He whispered. On Earth, Admiral Doyen watched the tactical display. Phase 1 was complete. The demonstration was successful. The Council now understood that humanity could destroy their military with ease. Proceed to Phase 2, he ordered. Show them we can reach any world we choose. Yun looked at his sister's picture one more time. I'm sorry, Yuna, he said quietly. You wanted us to be better. We're trying, but first we have to make sure this never happens to anyone else. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had spent 23 years pretending to be weak for a reason, and that reason was now revealed. Humans had been studying their enemies, learning their weaknesses, and preparing for the day when the Council's true nature was exposed. That day had come. The destruction of the Council's battle fleet sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Every news network, every communication channel, every government assembly was talking about the same thing. What had happened to those 400 ships? And more importantly, what else could Earth do? Fleet Admiral Nari stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dawn, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. She was a sharp-eyed woman who had spent her entire career preparing for this exact moment. Around her ship, hundreds of other human vessels held position in the darkness between stars. The Ghost Fleet, they called it. Ships that the Council didn't know existed. All vessels report ready, Admiral, her second-in-command reported. Excellent, Nari said. Begin Phase 2. Let's introduce ourselves to the galaxy. Across Council space on thousands of different worlds, the same thing happened at the same moment. Human ships appeared. Not arrived, appeared. One instant, the space around major Council worlds was empty. The next instant, massive human warships were simply there as if they had always existed. The ships didn't attack. They didn't move. They just hung in space above the most important worlds of the three species responsible for Yuna's death. The message was clear. We can reach you whenever we want. On the Vrex homeworld, millions of reptilian citizens looked up at the sky and saw 5 human dreadnoughts floating above their capital city. The ships were enormous, larger than anything the Vrex had built in centuries. They blocked out the sun, casting shadows over the city below. Prime Counselor Vrextal received an urgent communication from his home planet. His people were terrified. How had the humans gotten past all their defenses? How had they appeared without warning? "Get those ships away from our world," he demanded, his scaled hands slamming against his desk. But before anyone could respond, something even more frightening happened. The Vrex sun began to flicker, not randomly but with precision. The star that had burned steadily for billions of years suddenly dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. 19 times. Exactly 19 times. The same age as the human girl they had murdered. The Vrex homeworld descended into chaos. Their sun was their life, their religion, their reason for existence. And the humans had made it dance like a puppet on strings. A message appeared on every screen, every device, every communication system on the planet. "We can turn off your sun whenever we choose. Remember that." Then the human ships vanished as quickly as they had appeared and the sun returned to normal. But the Vrex people would never feel safe again. At the Kresh Collective's central hive worlds, something different happened. The Kresh were insectoid beings that lived in a hive mind, billions of individuals connected by a shared consciousness. They thought as one, acted as one, existed as one. Human ships appeared above their 3 most important hive worlds. Captain Jiho commanded one of the vessels, the Yuna's Fury. He had volunteered for this mission specifically. "Release the swarm," he ordered. From the human ships, clouds of tiny nanites spread across the hive worlds. The Kresh military tried to stop them, but the nanites were too small, too fast, too numerous. Within minutes, they had infiltrated every structure on all 3 worlds. Then the impossible happened. Inside every building, on every wall, on every surface, text began to appear. Not painted, not projected. The nanites were rearranging molecules to physically spell out words in the Kresh language. The same words everywhere, billions of times repeated across 3 entire worlds. Yuna. You killed Yuna. We remember Yuna. The hive mind of the Kresh Collective felt something it had never experienced before. Fear. Not individual fear, but collective terror shared by billions of minds at once. The humans had proven they could infiltrate the most secure Kresh locations without being stopped. They could reach inside the hive itself. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the text vanished. The nanites dissolved harmlessly, leaving no trace. But the message remained burned into the collective memory of every Kresh on those worlds. The Luminar Assembly watched these demonstrations with growing dread. The Luminar were beings of pure energy, existing without physical form. They had always considered themselves superior to species trapped in bodies of flesh or chitin. Energy beings couldn't be killed by conventional weapons. They couldn't be poisoned or infected. They were, they believed, invincible. Human ships appeared at the Luminar Energy Nexus, the heart of their civilization. It was a place where millions of Luminar gathered, drawing power from ancient energy sources. Fleet Admiral Nari herself commanded this operation. "Activate the conversion field," she ordered. The human ships began broadcasting a specific frequency. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, Luminar beings began to change. Their energy forms started to solidify. They gained mass, weight, physical presence. The Luminar felt themselves becoming trapped in solid bodies. It lasted only for 30 seconds, but those 30 seconds were absolute torture. Luminar, who had existed for thousands of years as free energy, suddenly knew what it was like to be confined to a single shape, to have a form they couldn't change, to be vulnerable. When the human ships stopped the broadcast, the Luminar returned to their energy forms. But the message was clear. Humanity had discovered the one thing the Luminar feared most. They could trap energy beings in permanent physical form. The Luminar could be killed after all. All across Council space, the 3 species responsible for Yuna's death now understood their situation. Earth had been studying them for 23 years. Every weakness, every vulnerability, every fear, humans had cataloged it all. And now humanity was demonstrating that they could exploit any weakness they chose. But the demonstrations weren't over. Captain Jiho received new orders from Admiral Doyen. It was time for the ultimatum. He opened a communication channel that would broadcast to every council world simultaneously. "People of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice calm but hard as steel. 23 years ago, humanity joined your council with hope. We believed in cooperation. We believed in justice. We believed the galaxy was ready for peace among all species. On millions of worlds, billions of beings stopped what they were doing to listen. 6 months ago, a human named Yuna discovered evidence of crimes being committed by members of this council. She was 19 years old. She was a scientist. She believed the system would protect her. She was wrong. Jiho brought up the holographic recording of Yuna's execution. Every being watching saw the young human woman standing in the grand chamber. They saw her present her evidence. They saw Prime Counselor Vrextel declare her a terrorist. They saw the enforcers raise their weapons. They saw her die. The Vrex Dominion, the Kresh Collective, and the Luminar Assembly murdered this child to hide their crimes, Jiho continued. They have murdered 1,846 other beings over the centuries for the same reason. The Council knew. The Council allowed it. The Council protected the killers. Silence fell across the galaxy. Smaller Council species who had lost people over the years suddenly understood what had happened to them. The truth was finally revealed. Humanity spent 23 years in your Council learning everything about you, Jiho said. Your technology, your biology, your military capabilities. We did this not because we wanted war, but because we needed to be ready. We needed to be able to protect ourselves if your system failed us. It failed. You have 72 hours. The Vrex Dominion, the Kresh Collective, and the Luminar Assembly will surrender themselves to human authority. The Galactic Council will be dismantled. A new system will be established with actual justice and accountability. Or we will demonstrate what else we learned during those 23 years. The transmission ended. Prime Counselor Vrextel immediately called an emergency council session. Representatives from all member species gathered in the Grand Chamber, the same chamber where Yuna had been executed. "This is blackmail," Vrextel declared. "We cannot allow one species to dictate terms to the entire galaxy. We have 10,000 worlds. They have one system. We outnumber them millions to one. They destroyed 400 ships without losing a single vessel," Torak pointed out quietly. "They can manipulate stars. They can reach any world. Perhaps we should consider—" "Never," a Kresh representative clicked angrily. "We are the Galactic Council. We have maintained order for 800 years. We will not submit to these barbaric humans. They can trap our kind in physical form," a Luminar representative said nervously. "They can do things we thought impossible. Then we fight with everything we have." Vrextel roared. "Mobilize every military force across all council space. Every ship. Every weapon. Every soldier. If the humans want war, we will give them war on a scale they cannot imagine." The vote was called. The council chose war. The decision was transmitted back to Earth. Admiral Doyen read it and shook his head sadly. "They chose pride over survival. Should we give them more time?" asked one of his officers. "Maybe they'll reconsider." "No," Hyun said, walking into the command center. He looked older now, worn down by the weight of what they were about to do. They had 23 years to be better. They had 6 months to surrender. They chose this. "Activate Cassandra." Dr. Sumi entered the activation codes. Across Earth's moon, Mars, the asteroid belt, and dozens of hidden locations throughout the solar system. The 73 hours passed slowly for everyone in the galaxy. On Earth, Hyun barely slept. He spent most of his time in the command center, watching the Council's response through surveillance systems the Council didn't know existed. Smaller Council species were panicking. 17 of them had already broken away from the main Council, sending desperate messages to Earth. They wanted to make it clear they had nothing to do with Yuna's death or the illegal experiments. They provided testimonies, documents, everything they had. Ambassador Minji worked around the clock receiving these delegations. What she discovered made her sick to her stomach. The 3 major species hadn't just murdered Yuna. For centuries, they had been eliminating anyone from younger species who discovered their crimes. Scientists who asked too many questions, politicians who investigated missing people, journalists who found evidence of experiments. 1,847 lives. Each one a person with family, friends, dreams. Each one murdered to protect the power of 3 species who saw themselves as rulers rather than equals. How did this go on for so long? Minji asked Hyun during one of their meetings. Fear and control, Hyun replied. The three species were too powerful. Anyone who tried to expose them was silenced. Eventually, people stopped looking. They accepted that some things couldn't be challenged. Until Yuna. Hyun agreed quietly. She was young enough to still believe in justice. She didn't know she was supposed to be afraid. Meanwhile, the Vrex Dominion, Kresh Collective, and Luminar Assembly were making their own plans. They refused to surrender. Instead, they were preparing a final desperate strike against Earth itself. In a secret meeting chamber on Sector Prime, the three leaders gathered. Prime Counselor Vrextal, Supreme Collective Mind of the Kresh, and First Light of the Luminar Assembly. We have located weapons, Vrextal said, his reptilian eyes gleaming, ancient devices from a civilization that existed before the Council. Planet killers, forbidden technology that we swore never to use. The humans have proven too dangerous, the Kresh Supreme Mind clicked. They must be eliminated completely. If we cannot defeat them, we will destroy their world. 3 planet killers launched simultaneously at Earth. The Luminar First Light pulsed. They cannot stop all 3. Their world will burn. It was a desperate plan born from pride and fear. They would rather commit genocide than admit they were wrong. They would rather destroy humanity than face justice for their crimes. But they had forgotten something crucial. Humanity had been watching them for 23 years. Earth's intelligence network was far more sophisticated than the Council realized. Admiral Doyen received the report about the planet killers within hours of the secret meeting. He immediately called an emergency conference with Hyun and Dr. Sumi. They're going to try to destroy Earth, Doyen said, his face grim. 3 weapons launched from hidden locations. Our systems can probably stop 1, maybe 2, but 3 at once. They're willing to commit genocide rather than surrender, Hyun said. They've shown us who they really are. Dr. Sumi was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice heavy with emotion. We have the capability to use Protocol 0 Phase 3. We've always had it. But it was meant to be a last resort. It's horrible, Hyun. Even thinking about it makes me feel sick. What does Phase 3 do? Doyen asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. It uses Yuna's research, Hyun said softly. My sister studied alien biology for 8 months on Sector Prime. She mapped the genetic structures of dozens of species, including the Vrex, Kresh, and Luminar. She was trying to understand them, to help develop better medical treatments, to make life better for everyone. He pulled up files on the holographic display. Her research can be weaponized. We can target specific species at the biological level, not kill them. Transform them. Transform them how? Doyen asked, Dr. Sumi explained. For the Vrex, we can trigger a genetic regression. Their species evolved from simple reptilian creatures millions of years ago. We can reverse that evolution. They won't die, but they'll lose their intelligence. They'll become animals again. For the Kresh, we can sever their hive-mind connection permanently. Each insect will become an individual. They'll lose their collective consciousness. Billions of beings suddenly alone in their own heads for the first time. For the Luminar, we can accelerate their entropy. Energy beings naturally decay over time, very, very slowly. We can speed that up. They'll have decades left instead of thousands of years. The room was silent. What Dr. Sumi was describing wasn't war. It was erasure. Not of lives, but of civilizations. It was making 3 species irrelevant on a cosmic scale. Yuna would hate this, Hyun said, looking at his sister's picture. She believed in second chances. In redemption. She'd want us to be better. Your sister is dead because they murdered her, Doyen said quietly. And now they want to murder everyone on Earth. How many more Yunas will die if we don't stop them permanently? Hyun closed his eyes. The weight of the decision was crushing. But he thought about all those other 1,846 victims, people who had died across centuries because 3 species valued their power more than justice. They made their choice, Hyun said finally. They chose to launch planet killers at Earth. They chose genocide. We're just responding in kind. Activate Phase 3. Dr. Sumi's hand shook as she entered the activation codes. May we be forgiven, she whispered. The Cassandra network reconfigured itself. What had been used to disable military technology now became something far more terrible. It became a biological weapon that could reach across light years and target specific genetic structures. The 3 planet killers launched toward Earth. They were massive devices, each capable of cracking a planet's crust and rendering it lifeless. The Council's three most powerful species had committed everything to this final strike. Earth's defense systems detected them immediately. Human ships moved to intercept, and Phase 3 activated. On the Vrex homeworld, something impossible began to happen. The Vrex people started to change. Not all at once, but gradually. Their complex brains simplified. Their sophisticated nervous systems regressed. Within hours, the entire Vrex species began reverting to a pre-intelligent state. Prime Counselor Vrextal felt his own mind beginning to fade. His thoughts became simpler, more basic. Fear, hunger, warmth, the complex political strategies, the centuries of accumulated knowledge, all of it was slipping away like water through his clawed fingers. What? What happening? He tried to say, but words no longer made sense. He looked at his hands, confused by them. What were they for? He couldn't remember. Across the Vrex dominion, billions of intelligent beings became simple animals. Their cities stood empty, their technology unused. Their empire collapsed in a single day as everyone forgot how to maintain it. On the Kresh hive worlds, the collective mind suddenly shattered. Billions of individual Kresh found themselves alone in their own consciousness for the first time. The shared thoughts, the collective purpose, the unity of the hive, all gone. The supreme collective mind, which had been billions of voices thinking as one, became just one voice. Alone, terrified. Billions of other Kresh experienced the same horror simultaneously. They had never known isolation, never known what it meant to be alone with only their own thoughts. Many of them couldn't handle it. They collapsed, overwhelmed by the sudden silence in their minds where the hive voice used to be. Their civilization, built entirely on collective thinking, began to crumble as individuals struggled to understand how to function alone. The Luminar Assembly watched their energy forms begin to decay. It was slow. They would last for decades yet. But it was irreversible. The First Light, who had existed for 10,000 years, now felt time running out like sand in an hourglass. What have they done to us? The First Light pulsed weakly to the other Luminar, but there was no answer that could comfort them. They had been given a death sentence with a long, slow countdown. The three planet killers reached Earth's defensive perimeter. Human ships intercepted them easily. The weapons were disabled, captured, and studied. Earth had never been in real danger. The humans had known about the weapons from the beginning, but the message was sent. The three species had tried to commit genocide, and humanity's response was complete. Admiral Doyen broadcast a final message to the galaxy. His voice was tired, carrying the weight of terrible decisions. The Vrex Dominion, the Kresh Collective, and the Luminar Assembly attempted to destroy Earth and murder all of humanity. We have responded. These three species are no longer threats. They have been neutralized. Let me be clear. We did not destroy them. We did not kill them. But they are no longer capable of harming anyone. Their worlds will become protected reserves. Their technology will be confiscated. Their civilizations are finished. To the rest of the galaxy, we did not want this. We wanted justice through proper channels. We wanted accountability through the system. But the system was corrupt. And when the corrupt tried to murder us all, we had no choice but to protect ourselves. From this moment, the Galactic Council is dissolved. Humanity will establish a new framework for interspecies cooperation. One with actual justice. One where power doesn't protect you from consequences. 10 years had passed since humanity erased 3 civilizations from galactic power. The galaxy looked very different now. Hyun stood at the window of what had once been Yuna's apartment on Sector Prime. The building had been converted into a memorial and academy. Students from dozens of species studied here now, learning about ethics, justice, and the cost of power. The apartment itself was preserved as a museum. Everything exactly as Yuna had left it that morning when she went to present her evidence to the council. Professor Hyun, a voice called from the doorway. The new students are here for orientation. Hyun turned to see a young human woman named Bora, his teaching assistant. Thank you. I'll be right there. He took one last look at his sister's apartment, then walked to the lecture hall. It was in the same building as the old Grand Chamber, where Yuna had been executed. Humanity had turned the place of her death into a place of learning. The symbolism was intentional. The lecture hall was filled with students. Humans, of course, but also Kresh individuals who had learned to live alone, former council species representatives, and even some younger beings from species that had been victims of the old council's crimes. They all wore the same uniform, all equal here. "Welcome to the Una Memorial Academy," Yun began. "You are here to learn about justice, ethics, and galactic governance. But before we discuss the future, we must understand the past." He brought up a holographic image of the old Galactic Council. For 800 years, the Council maintained what they called peace. But it wasn't peace. It was control through fear. 3 species held most of the power, and they used that power to silence anyone who threatened them. A Kresh student raised a manipulator arm. Her name was Hana, and she was one of the first generation of Kresh to grow up as an individual rather than part of a hive mind. "Professor, how many people did they kill?" 1,847 confirmed cases, Hyun answered. "But we suspect many more disappeared without records. My sister Yuna was the last." He showed them the footage of Yuna's execution. Even after 10 years, it was difficult to watch. The students sat in silence as they witnessed a young woman die for doing the right thing. "The question everyone asks is whether Earth's response was justified," Hyun continued. "We didn't destroy the 3 species, but we did erase them from power. The Vrex lost their intelligence. The Kresh lost their collective mind. The Luminar are slowly fading. Was this justice? Or revenge?" "Both," said a student named Taeyang, a human who had been born after the war. "It was both, wasn't it?" Hyun smiled sadly. "That's the question we'll spend the entire year exploring." Across the former council space, the new accord was functioning. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than what came before. Ambassador Minji, now Secretary General of the Reformed Galactic Assembly, worked tirelessly to maintain cooperation between species. The Assembly was different from the old council. Every species had equal representation. Decisions required consensus, not just the approval of powerful members. And most importantly, there were real consequences for breaking the laws. No species was above justice anymore. This was possible because of the Cassandra network. It remained active, a silent guardian watching over galactic civilization. Any species that attempted to develop weapons of genocide found those weapons simply stopped working. Any government that tried to restart the old patterns of oppression discovered their systems mysteriously failing. Humanity didn't rule the galaxy, but they monitored it. They enforced the rules they had established. And every species knew that if they violated the fundamental principles of the new accord, humanity would act. Some species resented this. They called it tyranny. They said Earth had replaced one dictatorship with another. But they said these things openly in public forums without fear of execution. That alone showed how different things were now. Dr. Sumi ran the Ethics Enforcement Division, a galactic organization that investigated potential crimes against sapient beings. It was mostly staffed by non-humans, though humans oversaw the most sensitive cases. The division had real authority. When they found evidence of illegal experiments or systematic oppression, they acted immediately. We received a report from the Helix sector. One of her investigators reported during a meeting. "A mining corporation is using indentured laborers in conditions that violate the accord." "Send a team," Dr. Sumi ordered. "Document everything. Shut down the operation if necessary, and make sure the workers are compensated for their suffering." 10 years ago, workers on a remote mining colony would have had no voice. Their suffering would have been ignored. Now someone was listening. Someone would help. That was the promise of the new accord. But enforcing that promise was exhausting. Dr. Sumi often thought about the cost of what they had done. Yes, the galaxy was better now, but they had achieved it through fear and overwhelming force. They had erased 3 civilizations. How was that different from what the old council had done? Captain Jiho had a different perspective. Now commandant of the Una Memorial Academy's military training program, he taught the next generation of peacekeepers. "We're not soldiers," he told his students during a training exercise. "We're guardians. There's a difference. A soldier is trained to win wars. A guardian is trained to prevent them." His students practiced not just combat, but diplomacy, ethics, and restraint. They learned when to use force and, more importantly, when not to. The goal wasn't to create warriors. It was to create protectors who understood that true strength was knowing when not to use your power. Jiho often visited the memorial statue of Yuna in the central plaza of Sector Prime. It showed her as she had been, young, hopeful, holding a data drive. The inscription read, Una, who believed in better. We're still trying. On the Virex homeworld, now called Wildlife Preserve 7, xenobiologists studied the devolved Virex population. The reptilian creatures lived simple lives now, hunting, sleeping, reproducing. They had no memory of their civilization, no awareness that they had once built starships and ruled an empire. Is there any way to reverse it? Asked a researcher named Minho, one of many scientists working to understand what humanity had done. Theoretically, yes, answered the lead biologist. But it would take generations of careful genetic therapy, and it would require the decision of the galactic community. No one wants to risk bringing back a species that might seek revenge. So the Vrex remained as they were, a living example of what happened when power was abused. Some people called it cruel, others called it necessary. The debate continued. The Kresh situation was different. As individuals, many Kresh were discovering things about themselves they never knew existed. Creativity, personal preferences, unique thoughts. It was terrifying but also fascinating. Hana, the Kresh student at the academy, had written a poem, something no Kresh had done in their entire history because the hive mind didn't produce individual art. Her teacher had praised it, and Hana had felt something strange. Pride. Personal pride in personal achievement. It was a concept that would have been meaningless to her parents' generation, but many older Kresh couldn't adapt. They spent their days trying to hear the hive voice that no longer existed. Some went mad from the isolation. It was a species-wide trauma that would take generations to heal. The Luminar were slowly fading, and they knew it. The First Light, who had once been a leader of billions, now spent its days teaching younger species about the mistakes the Luminar had made. We believed we were superior because we were energy beings. The First Light pulsed weakly to a class of students. We believed physical beings were lesser. This pride made us cruel. We forgot that consciousness matters more than form. The First Light had maybe 30 years left. It dedicated those years to education, to making sure the lessons learned from the Luminar's fall would not be forgotten. Back at the academy, Taeyang stayed after class to speak with Hyun. The young student had been wrestling with difficult questions. Professor, how do you live with what Earth did? Taeyang asked. We erased 3 entire civilizations. How is that justice? How do you sleep at night? Hyun appreciated the question. These were the questions that needed to be asked. I don't sleep well, he admitted. I think about it every day. I wonder if my sister would forgive me for using her research to hurt people. I wonder if we could have found another way. But the Council tried to destroy Earth. They tried to kill everyone. Yes, they did. And we stopped them. But did we have to do it the way we did? Could we have just disabled their weapons, occupied their worlds, put their leaders on trial? Maybe. But we chose overwhelming response. We chose to make an example that would terrify everyone. Hyun walked to the window looking out at the city. The galaxy is better now, Taeyang, safer, more just. But we achieved that through actions that I'm not proud of. We became monsters to stop monsters, and now we have to live with that. So what do? Taeyang asked. We try to be better, Hyun said simply. Every day we try to use our power responsibly. We protect the weak instead of exploiting them. We enforce justice instead of maintaining power. And we never ever forget what we did. Because the moment we forget, the moment we become comfortable with our power, that's when we become the next council. Taeyang nodded slowly. That's why you keep her lab exactly as it was. To remember.